Santa does not give gifts to children of poor parents. Those words still echo in my mind even now, years later. My father said them at the Christmas dinner table, surrounded by family, surrounded by children, surrounded by everything that was supposed to be love and warmth and holiday magic. Nobody objected. My brother Jason smiled. His wife Melissa nodded like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. And my two children sat there, hands empty, hearts breaking, while their cousins tore through mountains of brightly wrapped presents. I smiled. I took my children's hands. I led them straight to the door. The next day, when my lawyer cleared his throat in that small conference room in Phoenix, I finally gave my father his real Christmas gift. Let me take you back to that night. The house in suburban Columbus looked exactly as it always had during the holidays. Twinkling lights wrapped around the porch railings. A massive tree visible through the front window ornaments, catching the glow of 100 tiny bulbs. Snow fell gently, coating everything in white, making the whole scene look perfect. But perfection often hides the truth. I pulled into the driveway with my children Eli and Mia bundled in the back seat. Eli was 7. Mia was 5. They had been bouncing with excitement the entire flight from Phoenix, asking questions about Grandpa and Grandma, about their cousins, about whether there would be snow. I had tried to share their enthusiasm. Part of me had hoped foolishly that things might be different this time. The front door opened before we reached the porch. My mother Denise stood in the warm light, and for one brief moment I thought she might actually be happy to see us. Then her eyes swept past me to find Jason and his family pulling up behind us, and her entire face transformed with genuine joy. We stepped inside. The smell of gingerbread and roasting turkey filled the air. My father sat in his usual position at the head of the living room, the place he had claimed for as long as I could remember. Frank Morrison, a man who built his identity on being the patriarch, the decision-maker, the one whose word was law. He nodded at me the way you might acknowledge a distant acquaintance at a grocery store. Jason came in moments later with his wife Melissa and their 3 children. The transformation in the room was immediate. My mother practically floated toward them. My father stood up, something he had not done for me. Hugs and kisses and exclamations of how big the kids had gotten. Melissa posed for photographs as if the house was her personal photo studio, adjusting decorations to improve her angles. I guided Eli and Mia to the couch near the back of the room. They were quiet now, sensing something I had hoped they would never have to sense. Children are perceptive that way. They notice which grandparents light up when they enter a room, and which ones barely glance their way. Dinner was an exercise in being ignored. Jason sat at my father's right hand, the position of honor, the heir apparent to an empire of ego. His children were served first, complimented constantly, asked questions about school and hobbies and dreams. When Eli tried to share a story about his second-grade art project, Jason interrupted to talk about his latest business venture. Nobody asked Eli to finish. The comments came in waves, casual cruelty dressed up as humor. "Lauren, you are still doing that little freelance thing, right?" That was my mother not even looking at me as she passed the potatoes. "Agency, something or other," my father added. "Computer stuff. Very modern." Melissa laughed. "It is so brave to try to make it on your own like that. Most people just cannot handle the instability." I said nothing. I had learned a long time ago that defending myself only made things worse. They enjoyed the reaction. Silence frustrated them, but it protected me. At least I thought it did. After dinner came the moment I had been dreading. My father stood and announced that Santa had been very generous this year. The children scrambled toward the tree where a mountain of presents waited. Melissa pulled out her phone to capture every precious moment. I watched as name after name was called. Brandon, Tyler, Sophie, all of Jason's children. Each of them received multiple gifts elaborately wrapped, clearly expensive. Gaming consoles, designer clothes, the latest toys advertised on every channel. The pile of discarded wrapping paper grew and grew. Eli sat very still beside me. Mia had her hands folded in her lap, fingers twisting together nervously. They were waiting for their names. They kept waiting. The last present was opened. Jason's youngest held up some electronic gadget and squealed with delight. Everyone clapped. The space in front of my children remained empty. Mia tugged at my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "did Santa forget us?" Before I could answer, my father set down his glass and smiled at the room. "Santa only gives gifts to grandchildren who are truly loved by their grandparents," he said. Laughter erupted from Jason, from Melissa, from aunts and uncles I barely knew anymore. My mother looked away, which was her version of disagreement, but never actual objection. Eli looked down at the floor. Mia's eyes filled with tears. She was trying desperately not to shed. I stood up. The movement was so sudden that conversations paused. I did not yell. I did not demand explanations. I simply walked to where my children sat, helped them put on their coats, and headed for the door. "Some people cannot take a joke," Jason called out behind me. "If you are that sensitive, maybe just skip next year," Melissa added. I did not turn around. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing my face. I opened the door and walked into the cold December night, one child holding each of my hands. The taxi ride to the hotel was quiet. Mia fell asleep against my shoulder, exhausted from trying to understand something no 5-year-old should have to understand. Eli stared out the window at the Christmas lights on passing houses. "I liked the lights," he said softly. "Not how Grandpa talked about you." A small pain tightened my chest, but I kept my voice calm. "We will have our own lights next year. Better ones." Back at the hotel room, I tucked both children into bed, smoothed their hair, kissed their foreheads. They fell asleep quickly, worn out by the emotional weight of the evening. I sat at the small desk by the window and opened my laptop. I had work to finish. Even on Christmas Eve, the world kept turning. Clients needed search engine optimization reports. Research projects had deadlines. My small agency was everything I had built from nothing, and it demanded attention. But there was another email waiting for me, from my business lawyer, Sloan Mitchell. A reminder about our meeting the next morning regarding a financial situation that involved my father. A mortgage he had taken out years ago, one he had convinced me to co-sign during a vulnerable moment. The bank was making moves. Decisions needed to be made. I read the email twice. Then I looked at my sleeping children, at their peaceful faces, illuminated by the dim glow of the bedside lamp. They did not just insult me tonight, they hurt my children. They made Eli and Mia feel worthless, unloved, invisible. All to protect their precious hierarchy, their beloved golden son, their carefully constructed image of the perfect family. I closed my laptop and made a decision. Tomorrow would not be about saving anyone. Tomorrow would be about the truth. The morning after Christmas, I loaded our bags into the rental car and headed for the airport. Eli and Mia were subdued, still processing what had happened. I answered their questions as honestly as I could without burdening them with adult complexities. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that are not kind," I told them. "It is not your fault. It was never your fault." On the plane, watching the Ohio landscape disappear beneath the clouds, memories I had spent years trying to bury came flooding back. The favoritism had not started at Christmas dinner. It had been there my entire life, woven into the fabric of our family, like an invisible thread that everyone could feel, but nobody would acknowledge. I was 6 years old the first Christmas I noticed the difference. Jason got a brand new bicycle, shiny red with chrome handlebars. I got a sweater from the clearance rack tags, still showing the marked down price. When I asked my mother why Santa brought Jason more presents, she told me I should learn to be grateful for what I had. Gratitude, I would come to learn, was code for accepting less and pretending it was enough. The pattern repeated every year, every birthday, every milestone. Jason's achievements were celebrated with parties and praise. Mine were met with polite acknowledgement, at best criticism at worst. When he made the varsity football team, my father threw a barbecue and invited the whole neighborhood. When I got accepted to the National Honor Society, my mother forgot to mention it to anyone. By the time I was 18, I had internalized a simple truth. My family saw me as lesser, not because of anything I had done, but because of who I was. The daughter, not the son. The quiet one, not the star. The one who was always told she was more of a waitress type, while Jason was groomed to be a future CEO. I wanted to study marketing in college. I had dreams of building something of my own, maybe starting an agency, maybe working in digital strategy. My father laughed when I told him. "Marketing is a waste of money," he said. "Jason will take over the family business someday. That is where our investment goes. You will figure something out. You always do. So I figured something out. I applied for scholarships, worked double shifts at a diner near campus, survived on ramen and determination. While Jason got a new car for graduation and a fully funded education, I scraped together enough to take night classes at community college. Nobody in my family asked how I was managing. Nobody offered to help. I met my ex-husband during those years. He was kind at first, or at least he seemed kind compared to what I was used to. We got married young, too young, and by the time I realized the marriage was falling apart, I was already pregnant with Eli. The divorce came 2 years later, right after Mia was born. When I called my mother to tell her I was leaving my husband, her first question was what I had done wrong. When I asked if I could stay with them for a few weeks while I found my footing, she said Jason needed the guest room for his home office. You will figure something out, she told me. You always do. I sold everything I owned that was worth selling. I packed what remained into 3 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. I bought bus tickets to Phoenix because it was far away, and I had heard the cost of living was reasonable. Eli was 3. Mia was barely 1. We arrived in Arizona with nothing but each other and a desperate hope that distance might bring peace. Those first years in Phoenix nearly broke me. I worked as a waitress during the day, serving tables to people who looked through me like I was invisible. At night, after the children were asleep, I taught myself everything I could about search engine optimization and digital marketing. I took online courses that cost $19. I watched tutorials until my eyes burned. I practiced on fake websites. I built myself learning through trial and error what worked and what failed. The breakthrough came slowly, then all at once. A small bakery owner asked if I could help with her website. I did it for free just to build my portfolio. She told a friend who told another friend. Within a year, I had enough clients to quit the diner. Within 2 years, I had an actual business registered and legitimate with a name and a mission statement and dreams that finally seemed possible. My family never acknowledged any of it. The few times I mentioned my agency during phone calls, they changed the subject to Jason's latest promotion or Melissa's new kitchen renovation. When I sent photos of the kids, I rarely got responses. When I invited them to visit Phoenix, there was always an excuse. Too busy, too expensive, maybe next year. 7 years passed. I built my life brick by brick, client by client, late night by late night. I paid off the small mortgage on a modest house. I saved enough for emergencies. I created a stable, loving home for my children, something I had never had myself. Then my cousin Tatum called with an invitation. "Come home for Christmas," she said. "Maybe they have changed." I wanted to believe her. More than that, I wanted my children to know where they came from, to have memories of grandparents and cousins and big family gatherings. I wanted them to feel connected to something larger than our little trio in the Arizona desert. So I said yes. I booked the flights. I bought thoughtful presents for everyone, including Jason and Melissa and their children. I told myself I was strong enough now. I told myself nothing they said could hurt me anymore. I was wrong. As the plane descended toward Phoenix, I looked at my sleeping children and made myself a promise. This would be the last time. The last time I subjected them to that house, that family, that systematic cruelty disguised as tradition. Whatever happened next, we were done waiting for love from people incapable of giving it. The past had shaped me, but it would not define my children. I would make sure of that. The flight landed in Phoenix just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in deep colors. When the taxi pulled up to our small house in the suburbs, Eli actually cheered. Mia pressed her face against the window and said she missed her room. I understood exactly how they felt. This modest 2-bedroom house represented everything I had fought for. Every piece of furniture was chosen by me, paid for by me, arranged according to what made sense for our life. The walls held artwork my children had created. The kitchen smelled like the spices I had learned to cook with. This was home in a way my parents' house had never been. That first night back, I let the kids stay up late. We made hot chocolate and watched their favorite movie, all 3 of us piled on the couch under a blanket. I needed to remind them and myself that our little family was enough. We did not need validation from people who saw our worth as conditional. The next morning, I woke early and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. Running a digital marketing agency as a single mother meant there was always work to be done. I checked emails from clients. A craft store in Tempe wanted help with their Valentine's Day campaign. A spa in Scottsdale needed content optimization. A restaurant owner had questions about their Google rankings. These were the relationships I had built, one handshake, one delivered promise at a time. None of these people knew about my family or my past. They knew me only as Lauren, the woman who answered their questions clearly and got results. That version of myself had nothing to do with being Frank Morrison's forgotten daughter. I spent the morning returning messages and planning schedules. Around noon, I heard Eli and Mia stirring in their rooms. I made pancakes shaped like snowmen, a small apology for the Christmas that should have been. They ate eagerly, the shadow of Ohio already starting to fade from their eyes. After breakfast, I sat them down for a conversation I had been rehearsing in my head. "You know that Grandpa said something unkind?" I began carefully. "And I want you to understand that what happened was not about you. Some people have trouble being fair even to children, especially to children." Eli nodded solemnly. He said Santa does not like poor kids. I took a breath. What he said was wrong. Santa is not real in the way you think, but kindness is real. Generosity is real. And those things are not about money. They are about choice. Grandpa made a bad choice. Mia looked up from her pancake. "Are we poor, Mommy?" I reached across the table and held her small hand. "We have everything we need. We have this house and good food and each other. We have people who love us honestly, not people who love us only when it is convenient. That is not poor. That is rich in the ways that matter. They seem to accept this the way children accept explanations that feel true, even if they cannot fully understand them. We spent the rest of the day doing normal things. Grocery shopping, a trip to the park, homework for Eli, coloring for Mia. Ordinary life which had become precious to me in ways I could never have anticipated. That evening, after the children were in bed, I sat alone with my thoughts and my laptop. I pulled up the financial planning spreadsheet I maintained religiously. Every dollar was accounted for. Every expense was tracked. My emergency fund had 6 months of living costs. My business accounts were healthy and growing. I had built this from nothing, from waiting tables and scrubbing floors and studying until 3 a.m. while my babies slept. No one had handed me startup capital. No one had made introductions or opened doors. Every single client had come through my own effort, my own persistence, my own refusal to accept the limitations my family had tried to impose on me. The email from Sloan Mitchell sat in my inbox, a reminder of unfinished business. My father had taken out a mortgage years ago on a property that was now underwater. He had convinced me to co-sign during a period when I was still naive enough to believe that helping family was always the right thing to do. The bank wanted their money. Frank had been dodging their calls. They were coming after both of us now. For years, I had lived with the quiet dread of that debt hanging over my head. I had made minimum payments when I could try to negotiate when I could not. I had carried the weight of my father's financial irresponsibility along with everything else. But something had shifted on Christmas Eve. Watching my children's faces as they realized they had been deliberately excluded had changed something fundamental in me. I was done carrying burdens that were not mine. I was done being the reliable daughter who cleaned up messes she did not make, while being treated like she did not matter. Tomorrow, I would meet with Sloan. We would discuss options, legal strategies, and ways to untangle myself from my father's financial web. There might be consequences, there would certainly be conflict, but for the first time in my life, I was ready to prioritize my own future over my father's expectations. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The Phoenix night was clear and cool stars visible in a way they never were in Ohio's winter clouds. This city had given me a second chance. I had taken that chance and built something real. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. Not as the forgotten daughter begging for scraps of approval, not as the broke single mom everyone expected to fail, but as the woman who had already proven to herself, if no one else, that she was capable of creating a life worth living. I had replayed that Christmas Eve in my head 100 times, not the part everyone remembers, but the quiet machinery behind the scenes, the silent glances, the tiny shifts in posture, the choreography of a family that had rehearsed its hierarchy long before my children were born. Nothing about that night was spontaneous. Every detail felt curated to preserve the same order we had all grown up inside, an order where Jason occupied the center and the rest of us arranged ourselves around him like satellites with no orbit of our own. Walking into that house, I sensed the familiar imbalance slip into place, the way furniture fits back into old indentations on a carpet. My father barely acknowledged our arrival, only to rise moments later when Jason stepped through the door. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. It was instinct, the reflex of someone who had built his identity around elevating one child while keeping the other at arm's length. My mother mirrored the structure, effortlessly hovering near Jason, with a brightness she never quite managed with me. Even while pretending to prepare food or tidy the counter, her attention leaned toward him, subtly, guided by years of practiced devotion. Melissa drifted from room to room, curating her perfect holiday feed. She adjusted her children's collars, her own hair, the angle of the stockings above the fireplace. She smiled with a kind of polished warmth that never reached me because I was never part of her narrative. The moments her gaze brushed past mine carried a chill that was not overt hostility. It was evaluation, the quiet calculation of what belonged in her vision of a flawless family Christmas and what did not. Dinner sharpened these dynamics. The conversation flowed around me without ever touching me, every topic bending back toward Jason's achievements, Jason's children, Jason's concerns. My attempts to join in dissolved as smoothly as droplets on a hot pan. No one told me to be quiet. They just continued talking as if I had not spoken. That was the thing about favoritism in my family. It rarely announced itself. It simply erased whatever was not meant to matter. A walk to the kitchen for napkins revealed what I had not wanted to hear. Two low voices at the sink, my mother and Melissa. Their words were not cruel so much as revealing. She always takes everything so seriously. Better to keep the focus where it should be. They did not say my name. They did not have to. Their comments floated like soft threads, stitching together a reality they both understood. I was not meant to be centered, not even in my own childhood home. Returning to the living room only confirmed the pattern. My father and Jason were deep in a hushed conversation that broke instantly when I appeared, not guiltily but dismissively, the way people pause a private meeting because someone who is not part of it has walked in. Their world had borders. I was not inside them. From the hallway, I found myself studying the room the way one studies a staged production. Everyone played a familiar role. My father held the focus of the room. Jason absorbed attention effortlessly. My mother orbited them like someone reinforcing a gravitational field, and Melissa documented the illusion as though preserving a myth. Even the children mirrored the structure, mine drifting quietly near the edges, while Jason's moved boldly through the center. Then Aunt Valerie approached, her expression uneasy. She leaned in with a whisper carrying more honesty than anyone else had offered me in years. They planned things this time, not details about presents. She did not know specifics. But she had overheard talk about keeping boundaries clear, about not feeding unrealistic expectations. She looked at me with sympathy that felt like a hand on a bruise. Your independence unsettles them. You change the story, and they do not know what to do with that. Her words broke open something I had never fully seen. My parents were not punishing me for being poor or struggling or divorced. They were punishing me for surviving without them. In their eyes, independence was not strength. It was disloyalty. They loved hierarchy more than harmony, and my life no longer fit the blueprint. Standing at the edge of the room, I watched my father maneuver around Eli without acknowledging the drawing he had been working on. Not the absent-mindedness of someone distracted, but the practiced ignorance of someone who had already assigned value to each child in the room and saw no need to reconsider it. That moment, small and unspoken, told me more about my family's structure than any insult ever had. What struck me most was not the pain. It was the clarity. For the first time, I saw the invisible architecture I had spent years collapsing under. The traditions, the comments, the distribution of attention. None of it had been accidental, and none of it had been solely about me. I had been raised in a system that needed me to remain small so Jason could remain enormous. That system did not change simply because I grew up. It only tightened its grip when I slipped free of the roles they had assigned me. By the end of the night, I was not grieving the loss of a family I had never truly had. I was studying the remains of an illusion I had finally stopped believing in. The house that had once held so much power over me now felt smaller, almost fragile. Leaving it no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like stepping out of a room where the air had been thinning for years. As we walked out into the cold, my children holding onto my sides, I understood something I had not been able to articulate until that moment. The cruelty of that night was not meant to break them. It was meant to remind me of my place. But the place they imagined for me no longer existed. Tomorrow's meeting with my lawyer was not about numbers or paperwork anymore. It was about truth. Truth I had finally seen clearly. Truth I no longer needed permission to act on. I had spent my life trying to earn space in that house. I did not owe them any more of it. They had already shown me everything I needed to know. The hotel room felt smaller than it had seemed when I booked it. 2 queen beds, a desk by the window, a bathroom with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look exhausted. Which was appropriate because we were exhausted. Not from travel, but from the effort of surviving that dinner. I helped Mia into her pajamas and tucked her under the covers. She fell asleep almost immediately, her body giving in to the emotional weight of the day. Eli stayed awake longer, lying in his bed with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Mom," he finally said, "why does Grandpa like Jason's kids better?" I sat on the edge of his bed and thought carefully about my answer. Some people decide who they love based on things that do not make sense. It is not about you or anything you did. It is about choices they made a long time ago. He was quiet for a moment. "I do not think I want to go back there." "You do not have to." I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "You never have to go back if you do not want to." He nodded and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. I sat alone in the dark hotel room listening to my children breathe, feeling something shift inside me. For years, I had made excuses for my family. They did not mean it that way. They had their own problems. Maybe if I tried harder or achieved more or presented myself differently, they would finally see me as worthy. But watching my children absorb that same rejection had burned away every excuse I had ever made. This was not about my sensitivity or my inability to take a joke. This was about a family that had decided long before I was born that daughters were worth less than sons and that some grandchildren deserved love while others did not. I opened my laptop and began scrolling through old emails. There were messages from my father going back years, a paper trail of manipulation and financial entanglement, the mortgage he had convinced me to co-sign, the loans he had guilted me into supporting, the business decisions he had made without consulting me but expected me to bear the consequences of. One email stood out. It was from 3 years ago during a period when I was struggling to keep my agency afloat. Frank had written to tell me that family supports family, that I should contribute more to help Jason through a rough patch. The subtext was clear. My success, such as it was, should be redirected to serve the golden child. I had sent money. Of course I had. Because that was what I did. I gave and gave and gave, trying to earn a place at a table where my seat had been removed before I was old enough to know it existed. No more. I pulled up a new document and started making notes. The meeting with Sloan was scheduled for 10 the next morning. I needed to go in with clear goals, not just react to whatever options she presented. Goal 1, separate myself legally from the mortgage my father had mismanaged. Goal 2, establish clear boundaries that protected my finances from any future family entanglements. Goal 3, create documentation of the years of financial manipulation in case I needed it later. I was not planning revenge. Revenge implies a desire to cause harm. What I wanted was simpler and harder. I wanted freedom. I wanted to stop being the daughter who cleaned up messes while being treated like garbage. I wanted to build a wall between my family and my children, a wall that would protect them from ever feeling that kind of hurt again. The phone buzzed. A text from my father. Typical. He had waited until the middle of the night when he knew I would be alone with my thoughts. "You made a scene. The kids noticed. Come to breakfast tomorrow and apologize. Bring gifts for Jason's children. Do not embarrass the family again." I read the message 3 times. Not once did he ask about Eli or Mia. Not once did he acknowledge what he had said or done. He expected me to return tail between my legs, bearing gifts as penance for the crime of being hurt by his cruelty. I did not respond. Instead, I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the Ohio night was bitter and dark. Somewhere in the distance, Christmas lights blinked on houses where families might actually love each other. I thought about all the things I had accomplished without my family's help. The degree I had earned while working full-time, the business I had built from nothing, the home I had created for my children, the stability I had fought for every single day. They did not want me to succeed. My success threatened the narrative they had constructed, the one where Jason was exceptional and I was forgettable. My independence made their favoritism harder to justify, so they needed me to fail, or at least to stay dependent enough that they could continue looking down from their pedestals. I was done playing that role. When morning came, I woke before the children. I showered, dressed, and prepared myself for the day ahead. The meeting with Sloan would be difficult but necessary. What came after that would be up to me. I looked in the mirror and saw someone different than the woman who had arrived in Ohio 2 days before. That woman had still been hoping for acceptance. The woman in the mirror had given up on hope and found something better: clarity. Sloan Mitchell's office was on the 8th floor of a modern tower in downtown Phoenix. The elevator ride up felt longer than it should have, each floor ticking past like a countdown to something irreversible. I had dropped Eli and Mia at a trusted neighbor's house with instructions not to answer the door for anyone I had not specifically approved. Call it paranoia, call it a mother's instinct. I was not taking chances anymore. Sloan met me in the lobby of her firm, all warm handshakes and professional smiles. She was perhaps 45, with silver streaks in her dark hair, and the kind of calm confidence that comes from years of navigating difficult situations. We had worked together on business matters for my agency, but this meeting was personal. Her office was all light and functional space designed for focused work. She gestured for me to sit and took her place across from me, a folder already open on her desk. "Rough holiday," she said. It was not a question. I told her everything. The Christmas dinner, the deliberate exclusion of my children, the words my father had spoken. I told her about the years of financial entanglement, the mortgage I had been manipulated into co-signing, the endless requests for support that flowed only one direction. I spoke for 20 minutes without stopping, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Lauren, what happened to your children was cruel. But more than that, it was consistent with a pattern of behavior designed to keep you in a subordinate position. Your father uses financial leverage and emotional manipulation to maintain control. As long as you are entangled in his affairs, he has power over you. I know. That is why I'm here." She opened the folder and spread several documents across the desk. "The mortgage situation is complicated but not hopeless. You co-signed 7 years ago under what could be argued was duress, given the circumstances you have described. The bank is motivated to resolve this. There are options." She walked me through them. The property had lost value, but not enough to be completely underwater. There were programs for renegotiating terms, possibilities for buying out the debt at a discount. More importantly, there were legal pathways to separate my liability from my father's, especially if I could demonstrate that he had misrepresented the situation when I signed. "But the financial stuff is only part of what you need," she continued. "You mentioned wanting boundaries, legal boundaries. Let me show you what that might look like." She pulled out another document, a template for what she called a formal notice of boundary establishment. It was not a restraining order or anything that dramatic. It was a clear, legally documented statement of my intentions. No more financial involvement with any member of my family. No more co-signing, guaranteeing, or supporting any loans or debts. Explicit acknowledgement that any future requests would be declined. There was also a section addressing contact with my children. It stated clearly that any attempt to demean, exclude, or emotionally harm Eli or Mia would result in immediate cessation of all contact. It requested that family members not discuss my finances, my work, or my personal life in derogatory terms. It reserved my right to limit or end relationships as I saw fit. "This is not legally binding in the way a court order would be," Sloan explained, "but it creates a paper trail. It establishes clear expectations. And if things escalate, it shows that you tried to set reasonable boundaries and they were ignored. I read through the document twice. The language was precise but not aggressive. It did not attack anyone or make accusations. It simply stated facts and established limits. This was not revenge. This was protection. There is one more thing Sloane said. She hesitated, which was unusual for her. You should know that your father's financial situation is worse than he has probably let on. The mortgage is just part of it. There are other debts, other obligations. Some of them may come looking for you, given your past involvement. How bad? Bad enough that if things continue on their current trajectory, your family's comfortable lifestyle may not be sustainable. She paused. I am not telling you this to encourage any particular course of action. I just want you to have all the information. I sat with that for a moment. Part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to smooth things over and help out, wanted to feel sympathy. My father was in trouble. My brother might lose his easy life. These were supposed to be people I cared about. But then I remembered Mia asking if Santa thought she was bad. I remembered Eli's dimmed eyes when his drawing was dismissed. I remembered a lifetime of being treated as lesser, as forgettable as someone whose only value was what she could provide for others. Send the documents, I said. I will deliver the boundary notice myself. Sloane raised an eyebrow. Are you sure I can have it sent by courier? Less personal confrontation. I shook my head. They need to hear it from me. They need to see that I am not the scared little girl they have spent 30 years dismissing. She nodded slowly, something like respect in her eyes. Then let us make sure you are prepared for what comes next. We spent another hour going over details, anticipating responses, and preparing for contingencies. By the time I left her office, I had a folder of my own. Legal notices, financial statements, a clear plan of action. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. I was not descending. I was rising. I had not planned to go back to Ohio so soon. The original idea was to send the documents and let them arrive in the mail, cold and official. But something about the way my father's text message had been worded, that demand for apology, that expectation of compliance, made me want to deliver the message in person. I booked a flight for 3 days later. I arranged childcare for Eli and Mia with a family I trusted completely. I told them I had business to take care of and would be back the next day. They accepted this without question. Children are resilient when they feel secure, and I had worked hard to make them feel secure. The flight to Columbus was quiet. I spent most of it reviewing the documents Sloane had prepared, memorizing key points, rehearsing what I would say. I was not going to argue or defend myself. I was going to state facts and establish boundaries. Whatever happened after that was not my responsibility. The rental car was waiting at the airport. I drove through familiar streets that felt foreign now, past landmarks from a childhood I had spent years trying to understand. The old high school where Jason had been a star athlete and I had been invisible. The diner where I worked summers saving every tip for college. The church where my parents maintained their image of perfect family Christianity. I pulled into my parents' driveway just before noon. The Christmas decorations were still up, though some of the magic had faded. Lights that had twinkled so beautifully now looked garish in the gray winter daylight. My father opened the door before I reached the porch. He had been watching from the window. Of course he had. Control required vigilance. You came to apologize, he said. It was not a question. He stepped aside to let me in. The house looked the same as it had on Christmas Eve, minus the presents and the crowd. My mother was in the kitchen doing something that involved a lot of nervous clattering. Jason's car was in the driveway, which meant he was here too, probably summoned for reinforcement. Jason emerged from the living room with Melissa behind him. They arranged themselves like a tribunal, my father at the center, my brother at his right hand, the women positioned to observe and support. I did not sit down. I stood in the entryway and held my folder against my chest like a shield. I am not here to apologize, I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this. I am here to give you something. My father's expression shifted from confident to confused. What are you talking about? I removed the boundary document from the folder and held it out. This is formal notice of my decision to separate from all financial entanglement with this family. It also establishes clear expectations for how I and my children will be treated going forward." Jason actually laughed. "Is this a joke? You had a lawyer write up a letter because he made a comment at Christmas." "A comment." I let the words hang in the air. "He told my children that Santa does not give gifts to kids with poor parents. He said this after deliberately excluding them from presents that every other grandchild received. He did this in front of the entire family." "And you laughed." "It was a joke," my father said. His voice had the dismissive tone I knew so well. "You have always been too sensitive." I looked at him directly, something I had avoided doing for most of my life. "This document states that I will no longer co-sign, guarantee, or support any loans or debts. It formally requests that you remove my name from all financial instruments where I am currently listed. And it establishes that any future attempts to contact me or my children with the intention of causing emotional harm will result in complete cessation of contact." My mother had emerged from the kitchen, her face pale. "Lauren," she said softly, "this is family. You cannot just write us off with a piece of paper." I turned to her. "You stood there while your husband told your grandchildren they were not loved. You did nothing. You said nothing. That is not family. That is complicity." Melissa stepped forward, her face arranged in theatrical concern. "You are overreacting. Families fight. It does not mean you hire lawyers and make threats. I am not threatening anyone. I am establishing boundaries. There is a difference, though, I understand, if that concept is unfamiliar to you." Jason's face was reddening. He had always had a temper when things did not go his way. "You think you are better than us now, because you have some little computer business? He built something real. I build something real. You make websites. I build my own life," I said simply, "without anyone's help, without anyone's approval, without anyone's money. Can any of you say the same?" The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. My father looked at the document in his hand, really looked at it for the first time. His expression shifted from dismissal to something else. Understanding, maybe. Or fear. "You cannot do this," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I already have." I turned toward the door. Sloan Mitchell's contact information is on the letterhead. Any questions about the financial separation can be directed to her. "Lauren." My father's voice stopped me at the threshold. "If you walk out that door, do not expect help when things get hard." I looked back at him one last time. Things got hard a long time ago. You never noticed. I walked out into the cold Ohio air and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was quieter than I expected, but it echoed in my chest like thunder. I should have kept walking to my car. That was the plan. Deliver the documents, say my piece, leave, clean and simple. But my father followed me outside. "Lauren, wait." I turned. He stood on the porch, the cold air making his breath visible. He looked smaller than I remembered, somehow diminished by the winter light. "Come back inside," he said. "We need to discuss this properly, without everyone else around." I should have said no. I should have climbed into my rental car and driven away without looking back. But there was something in his voice, some crack in the armor that I had never heard before. 5 minutes, I said. He led me to his study at the back of the house, the room where he had always conducted important business. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, framed photographs of his achievements. This was his space, the place where he made decisions that the rest of us were expected to accept. He closed the door and sat behind his desk, gesturing for me to take the chair across from him. The arrangement was deliberate, putting the furniture between us, maintaining his position of authority. "You have changed," he said after a long moment. "I grew up." He picked up the document I had given him, flipping through the pages without really reading them. "This is serious. These are not the kinds of papers you just hand someone. They are exactly the kinds of papers you hand someone who has spent 30 years treating you like a burden." His eyes met mine. "I never treated you like a burden. You treated me like less important, less capable, less worthy of love and support than Jason. Everything you gave him, you withheld from me. Every opportunity, every kindness, every benefit of the doubt. I got scraps, and I was supposed to be grateful for them." "That is not true," he began. I interrupted him. It is true, and you know it. The Christmas presents, the college funding, the way you introduced us to your friends. Jason, my son, the future of the business. Lauren, my daughter, the one who will figure something out. I spent my whole childhood figuring something out while Jason had everything handed to him. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or just discomfort at being called out so directly. I did what I thought was best, he said. Jason needed more support. He had more potential. Potential for what? For spending money he did not earn, for taking over a business he did not build, for treating his own sister the way you taught him to treat her. He stood up abruptly, turning to face the window. You do not understand the pressures I was under, building a family, building a business, making decisions that affected everyone, and you decided I was not worth the investment. I stayed seated, keeping my voice level. That is your right. Parents are allowed to have favorites, but what you did at Christmas was not about investment or potential. It was about punishment. You wanted to hurt me because I stopped needing you. You wanted to put me in my place because I built something without your permission. He turned back and I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. The business is not doing well, he said quietly. Jason has made some decisions. Bad ones. We need help. I held up my hand. Stop. I do not want to hear about what you need. For 30 years you have taken from me. Money, time, peace, self-worth. You took everything I was willing to give and called me worthless for giving it. Now you want more. This is family, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. No. The family protects each other. The family lifts each other up. What we have is a hierarchy where I was always at the bottom. I am stepping out of that hierarchy. Whatever happens to you and Jason and your business is not my problem anymore. I stood and walked to the door. He did not try to stop me this time. Those documents are not a negotiation, I said with my hand on the handle. They are notifications. I am not asking for your approval or your understanding. I am telling you how things will be. I opened the door and walked out of his study, past my mother's worried face, past Jason's angry glare, past Melissa's theatrical concern. I walked out of that house and got into my car and drove away without looking back. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was running. I felt like I was finally standing still. The drive to the airport was a blur. I remember gripping the steering wheel, remember the gray Ohio sky pressing down on the highway, remember my heartbeat slowly returning to normal. I had done it. I had said the things I had kept bottled up for decades. I had walked away on my own terms. My phone buzzed continuously. Jason, my mother. Melissa from a number I did not recognize she had called from. I let every call go to voicemail. There would be time to address their reactions later. Right now, I needed to process what had just happened. The first voicemail was from Jason, his voice tight with anger. You think you can just show up, drop some legal papers and disappear? He is furious. You embarrassed him in his own house. When did you become such a selfish person? The second was from my mother, tearful and manipulative. Lauren, please, you are tearing this family apart. Your father did not mean what he said at Christmas. He loves you. He loves the children. Can we not just talk about this like adults? The third was from Melissa, dripping with false concern. I do not know what has gotten into you, but this is not healthy. Families work through their problems. They do not hire lawyers. I really think you should see someone like a therapist or something. This behavior is concerning. I listened to each message once and then deleted them. Their words were predictable, their tactics familiar. The anger, the tears, the pathologizing of my boundaries. I had seen this playbook my entire life. The only difference was that this time I was not buying what they were selling. By the time I landed in Phoenix, I had 13 missed calls and twice as many text messages. I ignored them all and went straight to pick up my children. Eli and Mia were playing in the backyard when I arrived, their laughter carrying through the winter air. They ran to me when they saw me at the gate, wrapping their arms around my legs, asking if I had a good trip. I told them I did. I told them everything was going to be okay. That night, after they were in bed, I sat in my living room and finally checked my messages. The tone had shifted over the course of the day. The initial anger and manipulation had given way to something else: confusion, uncertainty. A text from Pam, my cousin, who had always been kind to me. Lauren, I just heard what happened. I am proud of how calm you were. I think they are finally realizing what they lost. A voicemail from Jason, his voice no longer angry but exhausted. Look, I do not agree with how you handled this, but he is not doing well. He needs help. Can we at least talk? A missed call from my father himself, no message left. That was unusual. Frank Morrison always had something to say. Over the following days, information filtered back to me through Pam and other distant relatives. The family was in chaos. Jason had lost a major client, distracted by the drama at home. Melissa had deleted all her family photos from social media, a small but telling gesture. My father had been seen at his office late at night, supposedly dealing with problems he had hidden from everyone. The facade was cracking. The perfect family they had presented to the world was showing its true colors, and I had not done anything except refuse to play my assigned role any longer. Pam called me one evening to give me an update. Frank looks shaken, she said. I have never seen him like this. I think he finally understands that he pushed too far. It is not my job to fix that, I told her. I know, but I wanted you to hear it. For years you have been the one holding things together while they took you for granted. Now they are seeing what happens when you step back. I thanked her for letting me know and ended the call. There was a time when news of my father's distress would have sent me rushing back to help. That time had passed. He had made his choices. Now he could live with the consequences. The days turned into weeks. January came and went. My business continued to grow. My children settled back into their routines, the shadow of Christmas fading with each ordinary day. I received an offer for a leadership position at a larger firm, validation that my work had value beyond what my family had ever acknowledged. Slowly, I began to rebuild, not from scratch because I had already built so much on my own, but with a new foundation, one that did not include the people who had spent my entire life making me feel small. The weeks after Ohio unfolded gently, almost cautiously, as if my life were testing whether I was finally ready for steadiness. Phoenix felt different when I stepped off the plane. Lighter somehow, as though the city itself recognized I had severed a weight I had been carrying for decades. Warm air wrapped around me the moment I walked outside, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was not returning to a hiding place. I was returning to a home I had deliberately built. The leadership offer from Denver arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting at my kitchen table. Sunlight spilled across the worn wood surface, hitting my coffee mug and the stack of bills I had already budgeted for. I opened the email expecting another small client inquiry. Instead, I found a contract draft, a proposed salary, and a message from the company's director calling my portfolio the clearest demonstration of self-made expertise she had seen all year. Her words landed in a place inside me I had almost forgotten existed. I leaned back, not collapsing the way exhaustion makes you collapse, but easing into the moment, slowly feeling something unfold in my chest. The number on the contract was not just higher than what I had ever made. It represented stability I had fought for, drop by drop. Security, choice, space to breathe. I sat there imagining what it might feel like not to calculate every grocery trip or delay every purchase until tax refunds arrived. I imagined what it would mean for Eli and Mia, a life without me disguising anxiety about the electric bill, a life where they could sign up for activities without my stomach tightening at the cost. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Saying yes meant closing the agency I had poured so much sweat into. Saying no meant clinging to something simply because I had built it alone. There was no sadness in the decision, only a deep, steady certainty that stepping forward did not erase anything I had created. It honored it. I opened the contract again, breathed once, and accepted. I did not cry. Instead, a slow warmth spread through me, something I had not felt in years. Reclamation, not loud, not triumphant, quiet, like picking up a piece of yourself you did not realize you had left behind. Life in Phoenix reflected that shift. When I walked Eli to his coding club meetings after school, I paid attention to the way he talked more freely about his projects, his teachers, the robots he was building. Mia's paintings got larger and bolder, whole sheets of paper filled with color that spilled past the edges as if she refused to stay contained. Evenings became calm rather than survival-driven. Dinner was not rushed. Homework did not happen in a storm of stress. We had time, something we had never truly had before. Weekends turned into gentle rituals, a stop at the farmer's market, ice cream after the park, sunsets watched from our small balcony while the desert sky shifted from dusty rose to purple and finally into night. I found myself noticing things I had ignored for years. The way the neighborhood sounded just before dusk, or how the smell of someone cooking carne asada drifted across the courtyard on warm evenings. None of it was extraordinary, but every detail felt like evidence of a life finally lived with both hands open instead of clenched. One afternoon, while reorganizing the small hall closet, I discovered the old backpack I used during the hardest years in Phoenix. Stains on the straps frayed stitching remnants of a life built on exhaustion and necessity. I sat on the floor, running my fingers over the worn fabric, and felt a wave of tenderness rather than grief. That version of me had carried 2 children through storms no one else saw. She had survived things quietly, without applause and without witnesses. I whispered a thank you into the stillness of the hallway before packing the bag away. My past could rest without holding me hostage. Then came Jason's message. It appeared while I was cooking dinner, the pan sizzling softly behind me. His name lit up my screen like an alarm, and for a moment, I simply stared at it. The old reaction tightness in my chest, a ripple of dread did not come. Instead, a calmness settled over me. I already knew what the message would be: desperation, blame, a request to step back into the role I had finally stepped out of. Reading it confirmed what my instincts already knew. His words stumbled between frustration and pleading, the voice of a man who had never learned to stand on his own feet. He needed help. He wanted someone to fix things, and he believed I still lived close enough to the edge of guilt to shoulder the weight. My thumb rested on the side of the phone. A long pause hung in the room. At that moment, I noticed the smell of onions softening in the pan, the hum of the ceiling fan, the muffled sound of Mia humming in her bedroom. My home felt peaceful, lived in safe. This was my world now, crafted, earned, protected. Jason's chaos had no place here. I typed a single line: I hope you find a way through this, but I cannot be involved. No apologies, no explanations, no crack in the armor. Before doubt could whisper its old familiar lines, I pressed block. The screen went quiet. The moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and finally realizing there was solid ground behind me, not a void. A breath left my body slowly, almost in relief. I was not closing a door in anger. I was closing it because it no longer led anywhere worth going. Dinner finished cooking. My children called my name. Life continued steady and unburdened. That night, lying beside the warm glow of my bedside lamp, I understood what had changed. I was no longer waiting for my family to recognize my value. I had already recognized it myself. 3 months slipped by quietly each day, stretching a little softer than the last. Phoenix warmed into spring desert flowers, opening in stubborn bursts of color, the kind that appear even when no one waters them. Life had eased into a rhythm that felt almost fragile in its gentleness. Work flowed steadily. My children thrived. My mind settled in a way it had not in years. Then the phone rang. Pam's name flashed across the screen. I expected something trivial, maybe a story about a distant cousin, or a recipe she wanted to share. Her voice when she spoke told me everything was different. "Lauren, your father collapsed. It happened last night." I did not react at first. Something inside me paused, as though checking whether this news belonged to my life anymore. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, but the rest of me stayed still. No panic, no shock, just a quiet shift, like a curtain brushing against a window. "Is he alive?" I asked. "Physically, yes. Mentally, nobody knows. He is asking for you." A thin silence stretched between us. Not because I did not understand her words, but because a part of me waited for an emotion that never arrived. Sympathy should have rushed in. Concern should have taken over. But nothing came. The space where fear used to live stayed empty. I thanked her and ended the call. The apartment around me felt unchanged. The sunlight still sat warm on the kitchen counter. The distant sound of children playing in a nearby yard still floated through the open balcony door. My own kids were laughing in their rooms, arguing about which movie to watch later. Life did not pause just because the man who shaped so much of my pain had finally cracked under the weight of his own choices. A slow exhale escaped my chest. Not relief, not grief, but recognition. His collapse did not undo anything. It did not rewrite the past or erase the decades of dismissal. It simply confirmed what I had sensed during Christmas. His foundation had been rotting long before I walked away. I just stopped standing under the falling beams. That evening, after putting Eli and Mia to bed, I sat in the quiet of the living room and tried to examine the absence inside me. I searched for guilt and found none. I searched for anger and found only ashes. What surprised me most was the calm. That calm told me my healing had moved further than I realized. 2 days later, Jason emailed. The message rambled through explanations, tangled apologies, and blame thrown in every direction, including some aimed at me so messy I had to read sections twice just to understand where his thoughts went. He wanted to meet in Phoenix. He said he needed to talk face to face. He said our father was a broken man, that everything is falling apart, that the whole family is unraveling. A few months earlier, those words would have surged inside me with obligation, but now they only drifted across my mind like wind on water. I agreed to meet because curiosity lingered, curiosity, not hope. We met at a small cafe not far from my office. Jason was already there, seated near a window. For the first time in my life, he looked lost. Not defeated, not humbled. Lost in a way that hinted at someone who had relied on a map someone else drew, only to discover the landmarks had disappeared. He stood up when I approached. The gesture felt strange, out of place, almost formal. "Thanks for coming," he said. "All right," I replied, waiting for whatever came next. He sank back into his chair, elbows resting on the table. His voice carried a shakiness that did not match the brother I grew up with. I do not know where to start. I did not help him. It was not my job to ease him into honesty. He talked about the business sliding into disarray, about debts he did not understand, until they started crushing him about Melissa packing up and leaving. Each detail tumbled out like he was emptying drawers he had kept closed for too long. Somewhere beneath the words, I heard regret. Not for me. He was not there yet. But regret for a life he thought he deserved, but never learned to maintain. Watching him unravel was not satisfying. It was not painful either. It simply was. When he shifted the subject to our father, something inside me tensed, not from affection, but from the echo of an old wound. "He has been asking for you," Jason said quietly. "He keeps saying he should have done things differently." My throat tightened, not with tears, but with the weight of everything those words carried, and everything they could not fix. An apology offered only after collapse was not the same as acknowledgement given when it mattered. I waited for resentment to flare, but only a cool steadiness rose instead. "I am glad he is saying that," I answered, "but it does not change what happened." Jason nodded, eyes lowering. "I know. I just do not know how to talk to him anymore. He keeps circling the same things. Sometimes he cries. Sometimes he blames you. Then he blames himself. I do not know who he wants me to be." For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of something old and familiar. Not sympathy, recognition. The pedestal he had been placed on was finally crumbling under him, and he had no idea how to stand on level ground. He reached for his coffee hands unsteady. "I used to think you were dramatic," he admitted quietly. "You were not. I see it now." Hearing those words did not bring vindication. They passed through me with a gentle ache, like discovering a bruise you forgot about. Jason. "I care about what you are going through," I said, keeping my voice even, "but I cannot carry it. I carried that family alone for too long, and it almost crushed me. I cannot go back into that space." His jaw clenched the way it always had when he did not like an answer but could not argue with it. So that is it. It has to be. My voice did not shake. For my children. For myself. He leaned back, not defeated, just tired. I do not blame you. I just wish things had been different. So do I said. But wishing does not heal anything. We finished our drinks in silence. When we stood, he hesitated as though reaching for a hug, but unsure if he had the right. His hand dropped to his side. "Take care of yourself, Lauren," he murmured. "I already am." Walking out of that cafe, I did not feel triumph or bitterness, only a grounded certainty that I had chosen correctly. Some stories do not end with reconciliation. Some end with recognition and the choice to put the weight down. The morning after I walked away from Jason, I woke with a sense of stillness so unfamiliar that for a moment I did not recognize it. Not joy, not triumph, something quieter. A steadiness that settled into my bones like it had been waiting years for space to breathe. The house was dim, the children still asleep, the desert air cool against the windows. I stood in the kitchen barefoot listening to the silence. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt no weight pressing on my chest. Eli and Mia came out 15 minutes later, sleepy-eyed and smiling. They asked what we were doing that day, and I told them the plan was simple. Breakfast the park, maybe coloring when we came home. They cheered the way only children can, as if ordinary moments were celebrations. Watching them react to something so small made something inside me loosen even further. They did not need grand gestures or family performances. They just needed safety. They needed consistency. They needed a mother who could love them without distraction. We made pancakes our Sunday ritual, and they argued playfully over whose turn it was to flip the next one. Sunlight came through the kitchen window, lighting up their faces, and I found myself memorizing the way they looked in that moment. Unburdened, hopeful, blissfully unaware of the decisions happening far away in Ohio. When we finished eating, we walked to the park, the sidewalks warm beneath our shoes. They ran ahead, racing each other to the swings. I sat on a bench and watched them, letting my thoughts drift. The message from Pam came mid-afternoon. She said my father had been asking for me again. He wanted to talk, to explain himself, to say things he should have said decades ago. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. No anger came, no guilt, just a soft understanding that some people realize the truth only when everything else has been taken from them. That kind of realization might bring clarity, but it does not erase the past. My reply came easily. Tell him I hope he finds peace, but I have already found mine. The next few days moved gently. Work was steady. Eli brought home a drawing he had made of a robot he wanted to build. Mia performed a tiny dance routine she had invented in her room. I helped them with homework, cooked dinner, and tucked them into bed each night. Ordinary life filled every corner of our home, like light pouring through open windows. Then one evening, after they fell asleep, I stepped onto the balcony with a glass of water and leaned against the railing. The city below hummed quietly. A few stars managed to show through the glow. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who carried her worth like something fragile someone else might break. The one who worked double shifts at a diner and cried into sink water so her children would not hear. The one who boarded a bus to Arizona with nothing but 2 suitcases and fear clawing her throat. I wondered what she would think if she could see me now. She would probably be shocked. Not at the success or the stability, but at the peace. At how it feels to wake up not waiting for someone's approval. How much lighter life becomes when you stop asking people who wounded you to be the ones who heal you. The next morning brought another email from my father. Shorter this time, stripped of excuses. Lauren, I am sorry. I hope someday there is a way forward. I closed the message without replying. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger, simply because some bridges once crossed cannot carry weight again. His apology was a beginning for him, not for me. My beginning had already come months earlier in a hotel room after Christmas dinner, when I looked at my children and made the decision to protect their hearts, even if it meant breaking tradition. That night, I cooked pasta with Eli and Mia, letting them stir the sauce and sprinkle cheese across the top. They talked over each other, telling me about school and friends and dreams that shifted daily. I listened grateful for the chaos. After dinner, we played a board game. Mia cheated twice and giggled every time I pretended not to notice. Eli read the rules aloud with all the confidence of a child who finally feels seen. When I tucked them in, they asked for 2 stories. One new, one old. I chose the old one first, the tale they loved about a brave girl who crossed a forest to find a different life. Then I made up something new about a lighthouse that stayed standing through every storm. Both stories felt true in ways I had not expected. After they slept, I returned to my laptop and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked with a quiet invitation. I started writing. Not a report or a client brief, but something personal, something honest. A reflection on boundaries, on rebuilding, on how healing often feels like choosing yourself over and over in small, unremarkable moments. I posted it on my professional network the next morning, unsure what response it might get. By that afternoon, messages flooded in. Dozens of women wrote that they recognized themselves in my words. Some confessed they were setting their first boundaries with relatives who had drained them for years. Others said they finally understood that walking away was not failure. It was survival. Reading their responses made me realize something surprising. For years, my family had told me I had nothing valuable to offer. Now, strangers were thanking me for giving them courage. Maybe purpose does not always come from where we expect. Sometimes it grows from the fractures we try hardest to hide. Weeks passed. Peace took root. Not perfection. Peace. A steady rhythm to each day, a warmth in my home that did not require holiday lights or perfect decorations or anyone else's approval. My children laughed more. I slept better. The silence that once felt like emptiness now felt like a gift. One night, standing again on my balcony, I realized the truth I'd been circling for months. The real revenge was not legal papers or confrontations or even walking away. The real revenge was the life unfolding in front of me, a life built entirely by my own hands, shaped by choices rooted in self-worth rather than fear. My father might never understand that. Jason might never fully accept it. But understanding was no longer something I needed from them. Some apologies arrive too late to matter. Some families teach you what love should never feel like. And some victories look like a quiet home, a warm meal, and children who know they are cherished. I had walked away from people who made me feel small. I knew what this kind of peace felt like. My story had brought something forward in me. Anger, then courage, then clarity. Because every ending carries a beginning inside it. This one